So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about the locking enhancements. Now, before you all go on mute and go and make a cup of coffee, it is interesting for some of our customers, especially those who have big record lock or item lock populations. And we've made a couple of enhancements. Let me just show you this. We've got I'll show you a little test program to explain what we've got already. This test program simply, it reads a lock, and then it calls another program called lock2. Basically, that's all it does. And if we look at that program, the lock2 program just reads a record and it tells you if it's locked or not, something like that. So what I'm going to do, we have a locking daemon. We're going to default that to our normal locking scheme. This is the default locking scheme. So I've executed this program called lock1, and it's locked this item, and it does an execute of another program, but that other program, even though it's the same port number, says it's locked. And this is the default locking mechanism, that you don't share the locks between different thread levels. It's like having a different lock owner. Okay. The second one, which gets used a lot, is we call it port-based locks. So I'll start that up and we'll look at this again, run the same program. And whereas this one said that lock's already taken, now the same program says it's not locked. And the reason it's not locked is because in this model, the locks are shared between all the programs that have the same port number. So they're the two lock models that we've had for a long time. So what we've had to do is we've introduced two more lock models, and I'll explain them. And we've introduced a lot of other nice, useful features as well to get you really excited-ish. So the third lock model is for D3 customers, which is more persistent. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to restart our locking daemon and say the default is D3 locking. So now let's have a look at that. Shell, we'll run it, and it'll say it's not locked because in the D3 model, everybody owns the lock on that same port. Now, the thing about the D3 model is it will not release a lock and explicitly tell it to. And none of my programs actually tell it to release a lock. So when we come out of here and go back to the shell, which means port 1 is still active, if we go over here and look at the locks, we can see there's still this one lock here. And this is the D3 model. Nothing will happen until you explicitly release the lock with a release statement or a write statement. It'll just stay there. And what one customer did was their application's a bit, how can you say, not too well constructed, and they used to leave locks all that. They're used to this. They wanted this. That lock won't go until that user logs off. So now back to this one, which is retaining that lock. As soon as I log that user off, like this, that user's now logged off. And if we go back here, the lock's disappeared. And this is the D3 locking model. So that's the third model we have. Now the fourth locking model we have is for web-based applications, which is where you want to retain a lock, even though you know it's when you have a client and it's calling out our REST services, and every time it does an update, it gets a different process or a different port number because we have a server doing it. So what we're doing here is we're saying that lock is owned by not by a user or by a port number, but it's owned by a session ID. So if we look at this program, what we do, we call this function and we say, right, I'm a web-based program. I want to have persistent locks so they don't go away. This here, my session ID, that's going to become the owner of the lock. And if you've got that session ID, you'll own the lock. and then we've got a 60-second timeout. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to run that program now. And it says it's locked, and I haven't unlocked it. So if I go here, even though I've logged off and that program's no longer active, it's kept that lock. And this is, as I say, is for web-based applications. It'll keep that. We've got an age here, it's 9 seconds old. If I do that again, it's 20 seconds old. We've got a new option to JDLS X, which shows the extended information. So if we do that, we get a different output. And here we can see the file and the item ID. We can see how old it is and the timeout. Who took it originally, although this is meaningless, it's just for statistics, and what the session ID is. So if somebody wants to unlock that, they've got to have that session ID. So the idea is for web applications, you can get that session ID from cookies and so on and know which user it is and then release that lock. So if we keep looking at this, it's got an age, it was 32 seconds here. Let's see how old it is now. Oh, it's gone because it's exceeded the 60-second timeout. So the only way these locks will go away is if somebody else with the same session ID explicitly releases a lock, for example, with a write or a release, or it times out and you can have the timeout. So that's meant to be, well, that is for web-based applications. So let's do that one again. We set that lock and we can see it here. If we do show item locks, which is a very familiar thing that everybody knows, there's the item lock. And we can also do the X option, which on show item lock shows the extended information like that. And you can see again how old it is here with a timeout of 60. So that's an enhancements to show item locks. Other ways to look at locks are lock4.java. Here's a little program. This function here gets every single lock that's outstanding and then does a heading and then displays all the locks that we've got outstanding. What I'm going to do, I'm going to start off a test program which that started off 200 background jobs, each with 100 files and 200 locks. So we've now got 40,000 locks. So if I run this program, it'll get 40,000 locks there, and then it'll start displaying it. So if I do that now, there you go. And it just allows you to programmatically find out what locks you've got. This is the same. Oh, hang on. This is what we looked at, wasn't it? Which calls jBASE return info. This is the JavaScript equivalent, and JavaScript is our object language. And it does something pretty similar, except it gets all the locks in that class method call. And then when it prints them, it prints properties from the object. It gives exactly the same output, but there's two ways to do it. If we run show item locks, there you go. It took a little while, but we can see we've got 40,000. We've got quite a lot of locks there. And we can run show item locks with the X option. What else can we do? JDLS minus DVX, that's the X option to show. Oh, that was quite a lot. Now, something on the X option you'll see, if we do that, is it also shows you, apart from the age of the lock, which is 95 seconds, and the file, it's got extended information like what program and what line number that lock was set on. And it always collects that now. So that's really useful stuff when you've got a lock and you don't know quite what to do with it. Final thing we can do is we can create a file which is a JEDI, and that's like a window into the lock table. So I'm going to do that now. Create file. I'm going to call this file my lock, but of course I can call it what the heck I like, and you go type equals JLock. So instead of creating a dynamic file or a data file, it creates a lock file. And now what we can do things like list my lock. So we can use JQL to look at the locks like this. And because it's JQL, you can change the columns. So you can say file name by DSND port. Oh yeah, and let's put some columns in. There we go. There you go. So this is by descending port. Something else we can do is list my lock with port. Is it port greater than or equal to 30 and port less than or equal to 39? There you go. So, you know, because it's a JQL statement, you have this flexibility now. When you want to look at your item locks, you can choose the columns and you can put selection criteria in, and you know, you can put sorting criteria. So if we want to see sort my lock by age, oh no, let's do by descending age. So we can see the locks that have been outstanding the longest, and this is really useful for, you know, when a lock's set, you can see the ones that have been there for 5 minutes. You can put a timeout on it if you want. And here's something else you can do. Count my lock. Okay, so those background jobs have all finished now. There aren't any. There's just list my lock. There aren't any locks left. So I'm going to start those background jobs up again. And what we can do, for example, is this. Count my lock. We should have 40,000 locks now. Yeah, 40,000 locks. So we can do this. Select my lock with port greater than or equal to 30 and port less than or equal to 49. So that'll should select 20 background processors, each with 200 locks. So there you go, 4,000 records selected. And if we go delete my lock, it'll clear those locks. And now if we count it, we've got 4,000 fewer locks on it. And it's a nice little way to clear locks. We can also do this, of course, my lock, and that'll get rid of all the locks, which it has done. So what we've got really is we've got in this locking scheme, we've got 2 more locking models, one of them suited for D3 and one of them suited for web applications. We have extended information such as what the source and line number was it came from, and we always retain how old it is, and we have quite a large number of ways of displaying all the locks are outstanding and clearing the locks. And you can do that programmatically, or you can do that through JQL statements like list and select, or show item locks. That's cleared all the locks. Customers A. So I'll just set a single lock there. Now if I go edit my lock, you can see it's just returns an item. It's just a file, which is a window into the locking table. Tells you all the information about that lock. So let's get out of that. That's really all there is about the locking stuff. So if you're doing D3 conversions, you might want to consider using this new scheme to give you D3 compatible locking. And if you have a customer with locking problems, it makes it much easier to list the locks and see who's doing it and where it came from and stuff like that. So that's locking.